I'm in a really crazy busy period right now. So it's like, it's nuts. I barely keeping it together.
What are you putting together right now? Are you working on somebody else's book?
Well, let's see. The last book that needs to be printed this year is um, Julia Wertz's thing. We're re-releasing Museum of Mistakes.
Hmm.
And that's, but it's like a behemoth, like 500 some pages, just like collecting two old collections that are out of print, plus like a ton of new material. And it's, everything got kind of bunched up because like there's so many months where I couldn't redo work, partly because of COVID, partly because of like, we had this intense sort of like protest / riots over here.
Mhm.
Um, and, uh, uh, and then I was also sick, like I had this pneumonia, like it was just like it was a rough summer. And
Jeez.
so
Wow.
like everything kind of got pushed back, and now everything is due, and it's kind of crazy.
You got pneumonia?
Yeah, I had pneumonia like in April, like right when, like in the height of the original COVID scare, and
Oh,
I couldn't see a doctor. Like I had to take a COVID test. And I don't really even know if it was pneumonia. COVID came up negative. But nobody ever like x-rayed my chest or anything. It was just kind of like, okay, take a bunch of antibiotics, call me in the morning, and it worked. Like the antibiotics worked, but it was probably pneumonia, but it could have been like a really acute bronchitis. It could have been a number of things. So yeah,
yeah.
it was a rough April, May.
Well, you had a bad year because I remember, didn't your office get destroyed or something?
Well, yeah, that happened. That happened last year. Yeah, we were in this building that was actually kind of a nice building at first, but then they had this, and it had been renovated inside, and it was kind of great. But then the roof always had a little bit of a problem, and then we had this winter where so much snow fell that like it breached the roof, and then like collapsed a bunch of stuff, and then it just never got better. It just like they finally fixed that, but then like leaks would spring up in all these other places, and then at one point it sprung up like directly, because before it was like in rooms away from my office, but then my office itself like sprung a leak too, and like destroyed like a few thousand worth of books. Yeah, it was just like, yeah, it was crazy. So I'm out of the office now. At this point, I closed all offices. I'm just in the basement of my house now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
I
how
just
does
had to.
that, is that better to just be everything centrally located?
Um, Not really. I mean, it's nice to get out of the house. It's nice not to have like tons of packages being sent here, and like, and before, like, I could also like bring, have like interns or assistants or whatever, people coming by and like helping me out and stuff. And we don't really want to do that in the house with COVID.
Mhm.
So, so it's not really better, but it is what it is. So, yeah.
But how is Uncivilized been since the COVID outbreak? Like, has it, I mean, it's still working, right? I mean, you're still able to.
Yeah. No, we're still running, but it's like, I mean, I've had to cut like to the bone, like it's like closed all the offices, or well, the one office. And then I can't really have interns at this point. I am working with like one assistant, and that's remote too, so it's mostly just on the digital end. Obviously, like when Diamond closed its doors for a while, like we weren't paid. We had a bunch of books stranded there for a while. A lot of bookstores closed. Like sales have been like way, way, way down this year. Things are kind of like rolling again a little bit. So it's okay, but like there was a couple of very hairy months there. And then, like on top of all that was like, we had the riots. Like my closest post office was totally torched.
Yeah.
There's still like smoldering ruins nearby. So I can't like go to my post office anymore. I have to go like downtown. Yeah, it was just like one thing after another. Yeah, finally like quieted down a little bit over here.
I wonder, how do you split up your day? If you're an artist but you're also a publisher, do you go like from this time to this time I'm working on publishing, and then this time to this time I'm doing my own work?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, that's how it goes. I usually try to like my mornings tend to be like creative time. I'll do writing or drawing or both. for 2 to 4 hours, depending on like how it's going and how much other stuff I need to do. And then usually my afternoons, late mornings, afternoons are kind of like uncivilized book stuff or whatever other things I need to do. So that's kind of how it goes. Lately, it's been more sort of like touch and go. Like right now there's so much stuff due, and I just finished my comic book. So I have had a little bit less time sort of in the mornings to do that, because I have all these other things I need to kind of get out. So I'm just trying to get that stuff done, and then I can kind of hopefully kind of loop back to the old schedule. But that's kind of how it's worked. That's usually when I'm at my happiest, is like when I can do the morning and do my drawing and do my writing or whatever, and then kind of move on to other things.
Do you have to be done with work at a certain time in the day? Like you don't work at night?
I work at night, but it depends on the day. Nikki works nights sometimes because she works at a movie theater,
Oh, okay.
and so there's evenings where I'm just at home by myself, so it's like I can totally get more work done if I want to. But I usually try to get done by like 4:30 and 5. I'm usually pretty checked out by then, then I usually take a nap. I have a nap schedule, nap regimen. I have to nap around 5 o'clock for like half hour, 45 minutes. And then I do like a little workout, and then I'm usually pretty good for like the rest of the night, and I can either like take it off and do stuff with people or whatever, or I can do more work, and sometimes, if it's busy, I'll do more drawing. I'll do, whatever, pack some books or listen to some podcasts while doing that. And that's kind of, the evening is sort of like whatever happens, whatever I'm into. But
Yeah.
all the work has to be done by 5, and then more stuff can happen later.
Yeah, unstructured. Do you have a copy of I, Nina around you?
I don't have I have the Polish copy. I can show you in here.
Yeah, I want to see it.
Yeah.
This is the book you have coming out in the spring. Yeah, I want to see this.
But this is the Polish edition. It's a big book, hardcover. Look at that.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah,
So
it's a pretty intense book.
You can still read books from like in Polish, and then you're just like, I'm gonna publish that here. I don't know how that happened. I guess is what I want to know.
I mean, this one, it's actually a long story, but my own book, Beta Testing the Apocalypse, got published in Poland. And the artist that made Nina read my book, and then he kind of reached out. He's like, I really liked your book. I feel like, you already did what I wanted to do with Nina. So I'm like, so we're like had this big conversation, because I had this big architecture story in Beta Testing the Apocalypse that uses kind of the ancient city of Uruk as like kind of a modern city, and he's kind of doing something similar in this book, and it was totally like independently sort of like arrived at,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, you're doing something totally different. Like, don't, like, just because we're using the same name doesn't mean that this is like a copy. But yeah, I saw the book, I knew about the book before it was even created, like he was working on it. And we planned on sort of working on this book whenever he was finished, and it's an adaptation of like Olga Tokarczuk's book, but it's kind of like a partial adaptation. I think the first third hews pretty closely to the original, but then they kind of worked out a thing where he would kind of push it in a really different direction. So it's kind of an adaptation, but also like a like a mutation of that. So then when we're starting to get ready to publish it, it took like a while to kind of like figure out all the rights. But then like Olga won the Man Booker Prize in the UK, which is like the biggest literary prize.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like this book became like, this from like becoming a weird comic from Poland. It's like, oh, it's a weird comic from Poland, but it also has a Man Booker Prize winning author attached to it. And then so we had to kind of like change the plan a little bit. And then the next year she won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Oh my God.
So it's like, oh shit. So we pushed it back again, because it's like now it's a really different category,
Yeah.
So so yeah, so it got pushed back a couple of times, and then we also, we applied for some grants. It was kind of a long story to kind of get it together. But yeah, I can still read Polish. I definitely read other Polish comics. People send me stuff all the time. And if Uncivilized continues, who knows, like where we're gonna be next year. At least I'm gonna be here next year for sure. But like beyond that, like who knows where things are gonna go. I would totally do more Polish comics.
Yeah, it's a whole scene I've never even considered. Like, does it have a pretty good comic scene there?
I think so. Yeah, it's a much, in a lot of Eastern European countries, like there was not like a huge comic scene, kind of going back further, but Poland had a, pretty solid like comics market back in the communist era. I mean, which is when I was growing up there. So I read a lot of comics when I was a kid. That's why I got into comics. And so it has a pretty deep history and has a pretty deep sort of like, they're great artists and whatever, like there's a roster of these people. And I think the new scene, it kind of died a little bit after the, communism fell. Like everybody just was broke and there was no money, there was nothing happening for a little while. But then it's really had a resurgence over the last like, I don't know, decade, 2 decades or so. It's really like there's a lot of new stuff. There's a lot of new artists. There's a lot of really good work being done here. So,
is that a well-known artist?
Daniel in Poland, he is. He won like the best. I think it was best artist for this book last year in Poland. Yeah, I think he's sort of like one of the better known sort of young cartoonists coming up over there. There's other people, but like out of the sort of the new roster, he's pretty well known. So
I feel like we're kind of living in a sci-fi world at this point, and so
this is my take on sci-fi, is that I don't think everything is sci-fi now. Like there is no, like, if you're writing like a literary novel, you kind of have to make it sci-fi, because that's what's happening in the world. Like you've got AI, you've got phones that have all the information, you've got social media, all this stuff is like science fictional, and I think sci-fi is kind of the literary fiction of today.
Yeah, like you're carrying around a phone and your phone knows more about you than your partner does.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why people already write literary fiction about this shit, except they just call it sci-fi.
Isn't that a weird problem, by the way? Like when you're writing stories and writing comics, is that like how much the cell phone has become a part of every single person? Because you don't really want to draw somebody texting.
Right, just like staring at their phone.
Yeah, trying to figure out, then you have to draw like the little text thing, like you have to try and draw the screen of a phone, which is so lame. And then that stuff changes all the time, like the interface changes, everything looks different year after year, so then it really dates the comic. It's just such a hideous problem. Like I don't want to draw a comic that's set in this day and then just have somebody like sitting there on their phone the entire time.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we, maybe cartoonists need to come up with some new shorthands for this stuff, like some new kind of standard phone screen, that's like that's the comic version of that screen. And that you can use it, and it doesn't matter if the interface changed a little bit. Everybody knows, like, oh, this is a phone screen conversation.
I always do if anything's like electronic, I do like the zaggedy line, or ziggy zag.
Oh yeah.
And just color it in yellow, and then just put on there, and that symbolizes that it's electronic somehow.
It's like energy waves.
Yeah. So you came, I remember you told me about this before, but you came from Poland in like 1987.
Yeah.
And you were really into music that Americans thought was really lame or something. That's a story I remember.
Yeah, I remember, like, I don't know, it was like the first week of class, and it was like an English class or something. And I was sitting behind these two kind of like stonery type kids, and I was just like, Europop kid, I was into Depeche Mode and Aha, all that shit. And they turn around and they're like, so, what kind of music are you into? And I kind of told them that, and they just like they just looked at me and then they just turned around and they never talked to me again. Because they were into, Motley Crue. They were into the proper American things.
So growing up, did you feel like an outcast, like a loser in school?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, the people that I kind of like, the first half of my high school career was like, I just hung out with like the nerdiest people possible, like I was like I was in the chess club. I was, like doing Odyssey of the Mind, like all the, like like the nerdiest of the nerdiest. And they were, they were awesome, but like, yeah, I was like bottom of the rung, like, sort of the smartest and super nerdy kids. And then, but then like in the second half, I got in with theater kids. I directed a one-act play. I just like, I don't know what possessed me to do this, but like, I just like sign up, I'm going to direct a one-act play. And then I was kind of like with the theater kids for sort of the second half so we're still kind of unpopular, but at least like we had a little clique that was like unpopular together, so.
Were you reading comics back then?
Yeah. I've been reading comics since I was like 6 years old, like I never stopped. Like I just been reading, like, so it started on communist comics, in America, I got into, Marvel, DC, all that stuff. But also read a lot of independents almost from the get-go. Cause like, growing up in Poland, like I never read Marvel, DC in Poland. I read other things. So to me, like, a lot of people, when they start with comics, like those other comics seem so weird to them at first, to me it was like, oh, there's other comics, great. So I read like, American Flag, I read I read Cerebus, I read all the independent stuff that was coming out at that time, and then also all the Fantagraphic stuff, TMQ, that happened later, all that stuff. So yeah, I was reading comics the whole time, and I had a couple of people with me that were like into undergrounds and shit like that.
Do you remember like discovering American superhero comics?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I encountered American superhero comics was actually in Poland. There was this weird library in Poland that only had English books. It was like it was like an English language library, and they had one volume. They had a shitload of volumes of like Peanuts, like just those old like Fawcett Peanuts. There's like the little paperbacks, and then they had like one like same size paperback volume of like Fantastic Four, and I think it was the one where that was the Kirby issue with where like they meet Spider-Man for the first time. Like I think it was an annual, like that annual with like Spider-Man in it. I don't remember the number of that annual. But I had no idea who these characters were. I remember flipping through it and just being mystified. I couldn't really read it, but I thought it was cool. And then when I moved to Germany, because when we left Poland, we went to Germany first for about a year and a half. They had American comics translated into German. So I started reading Fantastic Four because I kind of recognized it from before. And then they had Spider-Man, they had X-Men, they had Conan the Barbarian. So I was reading all that stuff in Germany. But then they only had selected titles. They didn't have everything, So then when I moved to the US, then like the floodgates opened, like, all of a sudden you had, all these titles. And that was not only was there X-Men, but X Factor and, New Mutant. Yeah.
I don't know. What was it? There was like one called like Excalibur. That's what I mean. Excalibur,
Excalibur.
Was like
Totally bought Excalibur.
yeah. That's so funny. I remember when I went to Oslo to do their show there, like their OCX or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
They had Donald Duck comics everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Karl Barks, and one of the guys explained to me like one of the troops or something. Somebody had like brought like Donald Duck comics there during like World War II, I guess, or something, and then like people got like really into Donald Duck. That's like a huge thing for them. So you go to like a comic shop, they have like all those Karl Barks books and all the Don Rosa and stuff.
Yeah, no, Karl Barks is super popular, especially Northern Europe. I never knew about Karl Barks until I sort of like read about him in the Comics Journal. Like it was much later I found out about him. I didn't see any Donald Duck stuff in Poland. I'm assuming they have it now, but back when I was a kid, I definitely never saw it. I think it was maybe too capitalistic with like Uncle Scrooge.
Yeah.
On piles of money.
Well, you published a book about Karl Barks, right?
Yeah, we did that. It was yeah, it's part of the critical cartoon series that I'm doing.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was just a small volume. The author Peter Schilling wrote about his top 10 Donald Duck stories. So he wanted to kind of stay away from Uncle Scrooge because that's so like, everybody loves Uncle Scrooge and they're like the big, critical darlings. So he
Hmm.
thought Donald Duck was underappreciated and wanted to kind of give a big shout out to Donald Duck.
How many of those books did you publish? That
We've got
series?
four of them now. There's a fifth one in the works, and that's for next year. But four of them so far. Five. I'm probably gonna do one myself too uh, be, before too long. I'm kind of like a lot of the stuff I've been writing for the Comics Journal. I don't know if you've been reading any of that stuff. But no, I wrote about Eddie Current because I'm writing with a very specific moment in comics, 1985 to 1987. Like it's like a very I think it's a kind of a very pivotal moment. That's when all the big crossovers happened for the first time. Secret Wars and
Mm.
Crisis, but also just there was this huge cross pollination. Marvel was still publishing like creator-owned titles with Epic, and it was just kind of like this mixed up, interesting period. And after that, and even before that, things were kind of different. And so I'm kind of trying to like tease out what was interesting about that moment. So I've been kind of
Yeah.
writing about different series from that era and connecting them to that moment. Yeah, that's kind of something I wrote about. Crisis on Infinite Earths for the journal, and that's kind of what I was trying to tease out. Is like that was kind of like the biggest moment for those comics, like this insane like 12 issue series. But it was also like the end of those comics, and
Yeah.
like this like the sort of the new continuity was it was kind of like the beginning of the end of the old stuff. And then also it became like really influential on other media in the future because like for a while now, like every huge media corporation wants to have like their shared universe, where they can just keep building stuff, and that all came out of comics, in a big way from that era, and that's the stuff that's like really started to like eat into the sort of the creative part, the creative end of it. And that's why really honestly at that point Marvel had no business publishing like sort of creator owned stuff anymore, because like it's just like the money wasn't there, and like who cares about that stuff. Whereas in the 80s there was still like comics are not for kids, like maybe we can do these things, we can do these graphic novels, we can do these things, let's try all these different things. And that kind of fizzled out for the most part by the end of the 80s. And then it kind of like the market kind of bifurcated where the comic book stores became more pop culture oriented, and bookstores started getting more and more graphic novels, and now kind of where we are, like
Mm.
20 some years later.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
You're going to collect all those essays into one book?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know, like I've definitely had a lot of encouragement to do that. I'll see kind of how it goes. I definitely feel like I have at least like a small volume just on Crisis of Infinite Earths that I can do. I've written like a good like 40 to 50,000 words on that already. And but I can probably build it into a book. I've written a lot of about all the other different comics from that era that I thought were interesting and had interesting things going on. But I also want to write. That's also when like Watchmen came out and Batman: The Dark Knight, all that stuff. Although I want to stay away from those just because they've been written about so much already.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to tease out all the other more interesting, sort of less well-known things.
yeah. Well, can we just go through real fast what the books are in that series? I know this is Donald Duck, I guess Carl
Yeah,
Barks.
so we did Yummy Fur. So Brian Evanson wrote about Yummy Fur.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, the Donald Duck book by Peter Schilling. Then the third book was Mark Sobel wrote about Alan Moore's short stories. Yeah, so there's like 10 short stories that we were actually to reprint the stories as well. And then the last one is Anne Elizabeth Moore did Sweet Little Cunt.
Oh yeah, that one in Eisner, didn't it?
Yeah, that one we got an Eisner for that, for best academic book.
Awesome.
And so yeah, that was that shocked a lot of people when that was the award was being accepted. I think Peggy accepted the award for that because Anne couldn't go.
What was your first mini comic like? Not the ones that you were doing as a kid, but like the first one that you actually published to sell at a show. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I probably have it around here somewhere in my little archive. Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh, look at that. That's really 90s, man.
Reduction back cover. Yeah, it's pretty crappy. This is let's see, January 1995.
Oh my God. What's it about? What was the story with that?
It's just a few different stories. They're short stories. Yeah, there's like one story called Bug Spray. It's kind of post-apocalyptic, so it sets the theme for my work later on. There's one about a zit, which sounds really 90s. I don't know, there's like this weird story about an onion. And then there's this this comic I was trying to serialize for a while called Red Rhinos on Uranus. That was whatever. It wasn't great. I still, obviously I printed 100. I still have some.
How many issues did you print of that? Was that a one and done?
No, I think I made it through 7 issues and like a couple of specials.
Did you send it to like Dan Clowes and like all the other cartoonists?
I sent it to a few people. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I sent some to Dan Clowes. He never responded, but I got a really nice, and I think everybody has the story, like Jim Woodring responds. Jim Woodring responded to a lot of people. And but he had a really good one. I sent him, I think, 3 issues, the first 3 issues. And I never heard back from him. And then like 2 years later, I get this letter from Jim Woodring, and it's like, oh, hey, thanks for sending these comics. I don't know what happened, but I think, the raccoon that lives, or the possum that lives in the attic of my house found them somewhere in the mail and lined its nest with your comics. So he just supposedly just saw some remnants of this thing from a possum's nest.
Oh, man. And then what would, so I was kind of confused, like Cartoon Dialectics, is this like volume 2 of that series?
Yeah, it's like, so yeah, there was 3 issues that came out sort of between, very irregularly over the last like 15 years.
Okay.
And then this year I started the volume 2. So it's again from number 1 and 2. And so it's all new material at this point.
Oh, okay.
So it's Cartoon Dialectics 1, 2, but it's volume 2. Whereas before I would not, I don't know why I numbered them volume 1, 2, and 3. It was dumb, but like now I have trouble. I have trouble with people knowing what's what.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's it's just, this is the game we play when you serialize books.
Is this the first new work you've done in, I guess since the Trans series?
Well, I've been working on this a lot. So a lot of the stuff that's in here is, I'm just like bubbling up that whole book through the comics. I kind of like kind of hit a wall with it a little bit. Like I didn't know where to go with it. And so I'm kind of like using serializing as kind of like a spurring kind of thing, So I publish a little bit of the older stuff that I created, and then every issue I add something new that kind of like builds on the book. I kind of keep it a little bit thematic, so you don't have to read it in order because it's kind of designed not to necessarily be read in order, although some things will be sequential. But then every time I kind of like deepen the story by adding some new material and things like that. So it's kind of a nice way to be like, okay, what's missing in this older material? And I added in, and so there's new material, and it just kind of helps me get to the end of this book, and it gives me some deadlines and, kind of a path forward. Whereas before I just kept consuming more information and like trying to like figure out the world philosophically, and it just doesn't work. You have to like work through it somehow and put it down on paper. Otherwise it's like, you go crazy a little bit.
I love the Bruno Schultz essay that you wrote, because I really liked him a lot. Like I remember I had a book of drawings and stories that I got at Kilgore Books.
He's one of my favorite authors. He's like my top 3, Polish authors.
Yeah. Would it be sacrilegious to do a comic on him, like to take his story and illustrate it? So so Nick Dranasso told me this thing that's in my head all the time now.
Yeah.
He said that if you're a cartoonist, you should never take like a classic work of literature and try and turn it into a comic, because you can never add to something classic. You can only like degrade it. So like if you do like a graphic novel based on like Moby Dick, or I know that's been done a bunch of times, or whatever, but it's like
Yeah.
you're not going to make Moby Dick better. Like
Right.
Moby Dick is great. So that's what I wonder is like, say like you and I were like, we're going to double team, the Streets of Crocodiles. Is that what it's called? I think it's
One of the collections is called that. Yeah, and there's a story called that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to do like an anthology of illustrated stories by Bruno Schultz. We couldn't actually make that a good, like better than just somebody buying his book and reading.
Those stories are so. He's such a he's almost like, he gets compared a lot to Kafka because like a lot of the stuff that is kind of like a little bit weird and has that kind of almost like surreal sense of the world that Kafka has. But then his language is a lot more. I would compare his language more to like Lovecraft, where it's like it's very descriptive and very there's a lot more so it's a lot more verbal than Kafka. Kafka was almost like a minimalist in some ways. Yeah. So I don't know, it's interesting. Have you seen Schultz's drawings and
stuff? Of course,
stuff? Yeah. But he's got this very, very interesting line, very like cartoony kind of like approach to his characters. I don't know. It sounds interesting. I would maybe do something like that. I don't know. Like I've definitely toyed with that idea in the past. I've drawn several pages of just like straight up adaptations of various Bruno Schultz related things that I've never released, and I don't think they're good. So I would probably start from scratch.
So you started Uncivilized just to self-publish your own work?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like it's always been kind of like a little bit of like I always felt. For me, comics have always been a publishing project at the same time. It's never been just like I'm drawing something and then somehow it becomes a comic book. For me, it was always kind of like very intertwined. Like one of my earliest comics that I've ever made, I'll show it to you. Or maybe I can't show it to you. But it was always, I drew like the cover, I drew the title, I drew like the back cover, I drew a price, I made up a comic publishing company, had an indicia, had a print run, I wrote all these things on there. And I was like, 8 years old, So to me, like making that object was always important. It wasn't just, a bunch of drawings and some words, it was always like, had to have a package in a way, and so so when I was doing mini comics, at some point I was like, I'm just doing all these random mini comics, why don't I like create like a sort of like a more of an identity for it, create like a little bit of a thing. And then I always have, I'm always over intellectualize things, so I wanted to have like a little bit of I wanted it to be both a publishing project but also an art project, and kind of an intellectual project about comics, and so I definitely think about it as a business fourth, in a weird way, which is maybe bad. I don't know. But like to me, there's something really interesting about comics that I'm trying to sort of like tease that out more and more. And I've been writing these more like, I don't know if you read it in the new issue, but there's this like kind of almost like tongue-in-cheek essay about the superiority of comics over other media.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be doing a lot more of that over the next few months because I've been writing a lot about that. And a lot of it is based on real research, but also some of it is a little bit like I'm just being like a comic supremacist or something like that. So when I created the press, it was kind of like to kind of combine all those things together and try to keep them in a identifiable sort of bucket,
Yeah. And then
then it kind of blew up into other things. So.
Yeah, everybody started coming to you, like, please help me with it. Publish this for me, please. Whatever happened to John Lewis? Is he still creating work?
Well, he had a lot of problems with his elbow. He couldn't draw for like a while, like for like a few years. He's got a bunch of, I know he's written a bunch of stories, like further stories in True Swamp and some other stories. But for a long time, he was unable to draw at all. And then he's recently started drawing again on the tablet because I guess it doesn't hurt him in the same way.
Oh.
So I don't know. We'll see what kind of comes out of that. But he was doing a few, like a strip for Popula, Popula
Oh
magazine.
yeah.
That thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So he had a few strips in that. But yeah, not a lot of work. Yeah, he definitely kind of, he just couldn't get work done for a while. So
So how stressful is it running Uncivilized?
um, it can be stressful. Like there's definitely days and weeks where I'm like, just like, what the fuck is going on? Like especially this year, it's just been a really, really rough year. And there's times where it's like you just wait for something and like, or like you do something and it doesn't work out, or there's all kinds of things. Like there's so many ways to like fail with the book,
Mm.
and you can try to do all the right things and the book might still not sell, and it's like, so it's just like you just kind of deal with it. So and there's always, the old adage that like there's a few books that sort of like make enough money for everything else. That kind of works for smaller publishers as well. Like there's definitely books that do well, and then there's books that just like break even, and there's books that like don't do well, and it
Mm.
sucks. I remember like very early in Uncivilized, when I think it was during the Voyeurs tour, when we and Gabrielle were driving up through the West Coast, and I think that's when I was talking to Tom Devlin in one of the stops. For some reason, it was one of the conventions. I think it was Ape, when Ape was still around. In San Francisco, and he was like, "Just wait until you have to start pulping books." And I'm like, "Oh, that'll never happen to me." And now I'm like, "Fuck, I have to pulp some books."
Yeah.
Books, yeah,
Do you really have to pull books? Is that really part of
yeah.
it? I
I mean,
guess.
there's a warehouse with thousands and thousands of books, and you pay money to keep those books there, and the warehouse charges you a certain amount, and it's at some point you have so many books that like what's coming in is starting to get really eaten up by what's there. You know what I mean? And like if those things aren't selling at a high enough rate every year, you have to like do something.
You can just send me the copies of my books. I'll take them all.
I'm not pulping your books.
I'll store them somewhere.
I honestly I had to take like a huge pause on like all submissions this
Yeah.
this fall, like and summer. I'm definitely like I'm not locking my authors into like deals with exclusively with Uncivilized books,
Mhm.
so they're always welcome to like go elsewhere if they can get a better deal, because like I am a really small publisher. I can only do so much. But I can't really consider new books right now until probably like the beginning of next year or something like that. I'm just kind of like took a pause on that. I need to like see where the money's going to be, where how are we going to shake out with this sort of pseudo post COVID world that next year is supposedly going to be. We'll see.
Why don't you do crowdfunding ever for like a project?
Um, I've done it before. I don't know. It's always like a weird, like if you have a distributor, you're working with like distributors, like it's always like a weird thing to do where like they get less excited about a book when you already sell a couple thousand copies to just random people. So I don't know, like I definitely, there's a couple of projects I have that I want to do crowdfund for, but they're going to be almost like standalone projects that probably won't be distributed in any way.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's more appropriate. It's just a creative project that's really interesting that maybe, and I think this is actually the future of comics in some ways, is like more projects that are kind of, that have a finite life, or like certain books are going to always sell, like, like a Dan Clowes or
Mhm.
Noah Van Sciver or whatever. Like those books are going, they're going to be in the bookstores and they're going to sell. But certain projects are like, weird and kind of the moment and whatever. And maybe they just need to have a print run and that's it, and then, and they probably have a very limited audience to begin with anyway.
Right.
And maybe that's good enough. And that's totally okay. If you sell 2,000 copies and maybe there's no more for a while, maybe, and then it can gather steam. Maybe it can become a bigger project eventually or whatever. But I think that's not a bad way to think about a project, where it's like something that has a finite life,
Yeah.
that can be kind of created.
Aren't you reprinting beta testing for the Apocalypse?
Fantagraphics is doing it.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna do an uncivilized version.
I mean, because it's been so long since the first edition sold out, I was talking to Fantagraphics about this. I kind of like broach the subject every year, you know, like, hey, we're gonna do a second edition. And then finally, I think like last year, I was sort of like, well, you know, I need to know because I can just do it on my own, you know. And then finally, like Eric decided to go forward with it. So I'm actually going to add a couple new stories to it, and it's going to be hardcover. So this is exclusive breaking news here.
Yeah, cool.
Beta testing coming next year from Fantagraphics and in hardcover. So
Cool.
I made a new cover for it and everything. I sent everything off, and so we'll see how that goes.
How did you get involved with Mome?
So I mean, basically, I think you know the main reason was I met Eric at one of the MOCAs. I was living in New York at that point. I was like me and Jonathan Bennett were hanging out a lot back then. We kind of worked in the same district in Manhattan, so we would do a lot of lunches together, and we just like actually also lived very close to each other for a while. He had gotten into Mome and from the first issue because you know he's like an amazing cartoonist. I don't know if you remember his work. Like he's so good, and I really wish he was doing more work. But
somebody should collect his stories because they, you know.
I would do it in a second.
Great, yeah, he's really great.
He was doing like the really short strips in The Believer for a while, but then I haven't seen anything new from him in quite a while. And then anyway, so he got into Mome. So there's like a really funny story about that. We both went to Ape the first year of like Mome, and he had just gotten into Mome. Gabrielle gotten into Mome. We were sharing a hotel room, and he got invited to like some Fantagraphics party, you know, at Dan Clow's house. You know, because Gary Groth was gonna all tell him about like their Mome strategy, whatever, all that stuff. And I couldn't come because I was like nobody, like you know, nobody wanted me in Mome. And so then I was like, oh, you got to bring me some kind of souvenir from Dan Clow's house. So he brought me some toilet paper from Dan Clow's house. And anyway, but I knew, I knew a lot of the creators around Mome, and then I just met Eric through like random shows, MoCA in New York, and I'd given him my little trans minis, and he emailed me one day. It was like, I just read those; they were really great. And like, tell me if you ever do something, let's we'll consider it for something, you know. And then eventually, it just worked out. Like I think the original Mome roster just couldn't get stories done fast enough to like keep up with the original kind of publishing schedule. So I think that's why they opened it up a little bit more. Like actually there was like me and Eleanor Davis and a couple other people were like added in as like additional material because the original guys couldn't get it done fast enough, or like they couldn't get enough pages done in time or whatever it was.
And then you stayed there till the end, right? You were in the last.
Yeah, but I think I only did like the stories that are in beta testing are all my Mome stories. I think there's like maybe one missing. Oh yeah, there was like one collaboration I did with Dash Shaw. That was like kind of awesome, and it's never been reprinted, and it's such a cool story.
Will you include that in the next edition?
I don't know. It's like it's a weird one. Like the way Dash drew it, like and it's hard to tell at first, but like he actually like it would work best as a giant like scroll almost. Because like all the pages actually connect to each other. And it's all just this like gigantic painting comic, I would, if I would love to put it out that way somehow, where it's like just like this, like a concertina accordion thing that like opens it up. Cause I think it's like 15 pages. I don't know. Maybe that's a good Kickstarter project, like,
yeah. Boy, those were the days, man. I love that era.
Yeah. Mome was great. Yeah, I love doing stuff for Mome. But yeah, I wish I had done more stories. But like, I definitely once the book was sort of like on deck, I started to like focus more on the book, and then I was working on Transtera a lot. So then I kind of like stopped contributing to some of the later issues. But then I did have one in the the very final. I think the final issue I did have one story. Yeah.
And you had an interview in one of the issues too, I think.
Yeah, it was in the. I think it was 10 or 11, something like that. I can't remember the issue.
Is that the issue that has the Al Columbia cover of the cat?
Yeah, the cat, the cut cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great cover.
and were you, like at the time, because you're still kind of newish to the whole fanographic scene. Like then you get interviewed by Gary Groth. Were you a little bit nervous for that?
I was super nervous. I was really, really nervous. I basically, like, he let me like, hey, you know, here's the interview, here's the transcription, you know, fix it however you want, you know. And I basically like rewrote the whole fucking thing because like it was like, you know, I was like, I don't like, what am I even saying here? Like this doesn't make any sense, you know, like. So I kind of rewrote everything. It was pretty weird. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool that you do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, buy my comic.
Oh yeah,
Cartoons I like it too. You
I'll
got
have
this copy, right? I sent it to you.
Oh yeah, I got
Yeah.
it right here.
Anyway, this is my new one. $5 only, cheap.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description for everybody. Stuff.
Awesome.
All right, man.